Howdy everyone, and welcome back to GTRC. This is round three for the 2008 Super GT GT500 cars in the Group 2 class on Gran Turismo 7. And without further ado, let us begin the replay. We've got Jack on pole position in the NSX with myself, Tinterfish, alongside in the Lexus. And the lights go out, and we are underway for this 1 hour race at Alsace. Pretty clean start for Jack, heading up towards turn one, pretty much unchallenged from the rest of the pack behind. Then the two Lexus filter in behind with Tinderfish and then Doug in P3. Got Bradders and Petrol side by side as they make their way up to the flat out kink of turn two. Bradders just getting the better of Petrol, coming down the straight, breaking away a little bit as well. There's a bit of a separation between the top five and Superboy, who's just checking the mirrors for his teammate Razor in the GTR behind. But at the moment, no collisions from what I can see. We've still got Jack in the lead of the race as they head down towards turn 6, I believe this is. Turn 6, turn 5, I think. And pretty wide track here for the drivers to use. It is probably suited to either really fast cars or really slow cars. It's not particularly used that much for these types of cars, but it is a bit of a curveball for the drivers. It is a bit of a driver's track, this, because it's all about confidence through these long-handed corners, just seeing who can hang on to the tyres, who can hang on to the car the longest. And this hairpin in particular as well is going to be a particular issue for the drivers, because you're constantly braking and turning and coming into there. And it's a question of, do you lift off before you enter that corner, or do you just try and brake as late as possible and try and trail brake? Particularly in the Lexus and the GTI, it's probably going to be very difficult to trail brake with already the understeer that the front engine layout causes in those cars. But they come round to complete lap one. No incidents from what I can see, so it's been a very clean start from everyone. We've still got this battle between the two GTRs. Superboy still leading Hairraiser at this point in the race. Both of these drivers running the hard compounded tyres, so both wanting to get that stint out of the way as soon as possible. And I will quickly run through the strategy as well. If you've not been here for the first two rounds, then you won't be aware that this is a 1 hour race with a mandatory stop for tyres. So you have to use both hards and medium compounds. Those are the only two dry compounds available. And you have to use both tyres for a minimum of 5 laps. So any less than that will be penalised. But once you've done your 5 laps, you can pit off of those tyres. But around this track, you are definitely going to want to use hard tyres and get the most out of that longevity that they provide. Because, as I said before, the long radius corners around this track just means it absolutely murders the tyres, really. So there is also debate as to whether this is a 2-stop or 1-stop race. This was the case for Watkins Glen, if you did watch that race. There was pretty much a 60-40 split of the drivers. 60% of the drivers decided to do a 2-stop race, whereas 40% decided to stick it out on a 1-stop. And a 1-stop did prove to be the winning strategy, as Tinderfish managed to win that race, but it wasn't generally well liked, as Bart has a spin coming out the final corner, lighting up the rear end and clipping the pit wall. Thankfully he's ghosted and avoided everyone, and no other collisions apart from that contact with the wall. But already drivers suffering with traction loss, and TDC actually potentially losing the back end himself as he's on the wrong side of the track coming out turn one, or maybe he just conceded the position for whatever reason. But coming back to the front, we've got Small Jack building up an early advantage. He's on the medium compounded tyres, same as myself and Doug. So everyone on the podium at the moment on that softer compound. And I think this might indicate a bit of a 2-stop strategy for these drivers, considering that on the heavy tank of fuel, the full tank of fuel, they are running a softer compound. And Doug Barrow running off the track there, almost grazing the barrier, but I think he's just about kept it clean. but he's going to have to spend a bit of time just clearing the surface of those tyres, trying to get rid of the grass, and this is going to give Bradders all the impotence he needs for a move. Can he go round the outside, coming down one of the back straights, coming into the final sector of the lap? And Bradders manages to slip up the inside with a late braking manoeuvre up into P3. So despite Bradders not really having a lot of time in his schedule to practice for these races, he's putting on quite a show at the start, and Doug Barrow off the track again, giving now Petrol a run down the outside, not even a contest coming into the braking zone. So Doug Barrow having the lap free from hell, as he's just cost himself 2 positions through just no front end grip from the looks of it, just straight up understeering off the track. But at least he hasn't been round at this point, and he's still not lost touch with those drivers despite losing those positions, as Superboy as well running all over that exit curb. So drivers are struggling massively. It isn't particularly sunny out there. There is some sun poking through, but there is a bit of cloud on the track as well. So it is slightly overcast, which does bring the track temperature down a little bit, which is affecting especially those on hards as well. It definitely does affect your grip, because the amount of prep the drivers has to do just to build up that tyre temperature, just to give them that working window of grip for these slick tyres. It just makes it a whole lot difficult when the sun isn't heating up the tarmac as much. Quickly checking through the rest of the field. I don't think anything else. These two, Bar and TDC, battling over 10th and 11th respectively. But these mistakes that the drivers are making is spreading the pack out. I think Bradders has just gone a little bit deep there. And I think that is just the rotation of the car struggling. As I think we've got a spinner, TDC, with heavy damage to the right-hand side of his, the left-hand side of his car there. So I think he might have just clipped the grass coming off of the banking and has span into the shorter track's pit wall. It is a bit perilous around that section, because obviously there has to be a solid concrete wall to separate the pit lane at that point in the track. So there's very little runoff for a mistake, and unfortunately, as you can see, it punishes you harshly for any mistake there. So the battle for best of the rest is starting to be disputed once again. Petrol not breaking away the same way that Bradders has been able to do after making that overtake on Doug Barrow. So Petrol probably checking the mirrors a little bit, just seeing if Doug is going to make an attack at any point through here. Doug does seemingly have to have a lot of confidence around turn 4, but it's not really an overtaking opportunity here, because the straight just isn't long enough to prep the car for a late braking maneuver. But it doesn't even matter, he swoops round the outside with Petrol losing the back end under traction, and Doug reclaims that 4th position, best of the rest of the field at the moment, and seemingly lost none of the grip from that Lexus despite having several offs. He's managed to scrub those tyres clean now, and you could set off after Bradders, but there is a lot of time to make up, and the common phrase in racing is it's one thing to catch and it's another thing to overtake. So there is quite the challenge ahead of Doug at the moment. As you can see, he's already gone wide, but I think he just about kept it on the curb, so he did get still a pretty decent exit coming down towards the final chicane. But not even 10 minutes into the race, and we've seen so many mistakes so far. It really is one of those really unique tracks that not many people drive around. It is a bit of an unknown for a lot of the drivers, because it's not used that much in sport mode. It's not really a well-known track within the game. It's not one of the most notorious original tracks in Gran Turismo 7. So it's not really driven around that much for most of these drivers. And this will probably be one of the few times they will do a competitive race around here all year long. But it has been on the GTRC calendar twice in the past year or so. So I'd imagine that those who are a little bit more experienced, those who played this game a little bit more, will have the edge at the moment. And 3 of the top 5 drivers were in the last GTRC season when we were doing the GT3s. So it does seem that experience is paying off for the most part around here, for the majority. And we're already seeing quite a lot of field spread. There is quite a lot of dirty air produced by these high downforce cars. And the long radius corners do seem to separate the cars out. It does make it quite difficult to follow your rival, considering that there's not that many places to overtake and you're sort of stuck behind drivers for ages, and then you're overheating the tyres because your front end is just scrubbing out wide through all the corners. You can see that from Mike as well. As I say that, just clipping the grass on the exit of that hairpin and actually giving Bar a lot of momentum now coming through the final part of the lap. So despite being in the wall at one point, it has not slowed Bar down at all. He's already caught to the back of Mike, running in 9th place. And Mike already bailing, so he has done his mandatory 5 laps on that compound. He's actually done 6 laps on those hard tyres, and already wanting to get off to the medium tyres. So this is a clear indication for all the other drivers that a 2-stop is, well, Mike is definitely going to conduct a 2-stop race. And it isn't actually the set of mediums that I thought he was going to go for. He's gone for another set of, oh no, it has just clicked over. It was showing hard tyres as brand new, but he has gone for medium tyres. So that is 100% a 2-stop race. There is no way you can get 50 minutes out of a set of medium tyres with the lobby settings that we have. So that is definitely one to watch. We'll see how much progress he can make. He's obviously on a major undercut compared to everyone else, because I don't think there's that many other people at the moment considering a pit stop. If they were, they would have probably done it after the 5-lap requirement. But seeing as most other drivers have pushed on from the first 5 laps, I don't think anyone's going to make a stop quite as early as that. We're probably going to see the next couple of stops around about 15 minutes into the race, I would say, judging off of the tyre wear that we can see from Jack, our race leader. He's already used about 35% of that front left tyre. Obviously, with it being a clockwise circuit, you do more right-handers than left-handers naturally to get back round to the next lap. So the front left does take a very big beating around here. And scratch what I said about pit stops, because we've got another driver in, Hair Razor, doing 7 laps on that first set of hard tyres. Potentially swapping over to mediums. He could do with overtaking Superboy, who has kind of been boxing him in at the back of the top 7, I believe it was. I think he was running in 7th. But Razor comes out in P8 on brand new mediums, as I predicted, with a full tank of fuel. And Mike already back ahead of Bar. I think that has actually been a change of position. Or no, Bar has actually just pitted. So these two come out right next to each other. So everyone seemingly reacting to other drivers making their first stops in this race. And Bar, seeing what Mike was doing, he's now decided to get off those old hard tyres and pit in for the brand new mediums, same as Razor and Mike. And it actually seems quite beneficial to spend an extra lap on warm tyres, because you can just see that the Lexus has been able to cling onto the back of that NSX whilst it's trying to warm its tyres up. So it looks like warm hard tyres do actually provide quite a bit of grip. From my own personal experience driving this race in the Lexus, it actually did feel like the Lexus could carry the hard tyres a lot better than what other cars could. So it does seem to be that the Lexus actually prefers harder compounds, whereas I think the NSX definitely does prefer mediums, and I think a lot of other drivers do prefer that medium compound, even though it does wear out quite quickly. And Mike running onto the grass, and there's a crash as Bar just about misses the hay bales. And he's just about escaped damage there. That was very good car control to not let that slide into the Armco any heavier than that. And unfortunately, Bar's incredible in-lap before he pitted to get himself back onto the tail of Mike all of his hard work's come undone. He's going to have to either outsmart him on strategy or just use raw pace to catch up. I don't think he's short on raw pace, if I'm honest, because he's demonstrated quite good pace at the moment. But he might just be pushing a little bit too hard, lighting up those rear tyres. So he's just got to try and let those tyres cool down, regroup, and get off after the top 10. But it's definitely not worth losing hope at this point. Every driver, as it stands, is going to score points, unless if there is a rage quit at any point, because we use the British Touring Car style point system, and if you're familiar with that, it is basically points down from 1st to 15th in the running order. So everyone at the moment, we've got 11 cars in the field, everyone will be scoring points. So it is always worth carrying on, even if you've had a pretty shocking race. You will still get a handful of points out of it, and there is also a point for the fastest lap of the race as well, so it is always worth pushing for that as well. In case you've got the gap behind, you can always pit for an extra set of tyres and potentially snatch that fastest lap point away from your rival in particular. It definitely, if anything, prevents other people from scoring that point if you're able to keep it. And this group of cars from 3rd to 5th, Bradders, Doug Barra and Petrol, has started to spread out a little bit, but I think Doug is reducing that gap to the GTR ahead of him. So he seemingly still has good pace, despite those medium tyres looking very second-hand at the moment. There is still pace out there for Doug Barra. Petrolhead actually running the hard tyres at the moment, so you would expect that drop off in pace at the middle point of the race, just about hanging on to it there, clipping the grass and nearly throwing himself into the Armco. But as I was mentioning, Petrol, you would expect slight drop off, and he's actually binned it fully into the pit wall. Not the first car to end up in that wall for the short track, backing the car in there, and he's got rear bumper and diffuser damage. And just as he was setting himself up so well for that alternate strategy, starting on the hards, keeping in touch with the podium runners, and he's lost a lot of time through that. He's managed to hang on to his position, thankfully, but that, I'm sure Superboy in P6 will have seen that crash happen just up the road. He probably would have got yellow flags for that. And cutting to myself coming out of the pit lane on brand new hard tyres, managing to filter back out into P4. So actually that mistake from Petrol has just cost him inheriting that P4 after I had pitted. So that has played off quite well into my hands, because now I have come out in clean air, and now I'm just going to build that tyre temperature steadily. And we are approaching 1/3 of the way through the race. This is turning out to be a little bit of a slow burner in terms of actual on-track overtakes. Everyone not really wanting to stress those tyres too much, because it really will hurt you at the end of the race. You don't want to leave yourself dry by the time it gets to the end and you've got no tyre to work with, because there's always opportunities. Anything can always happen at the end of the race. And I think we'll take this opportunity to ride on board with someone. We'll take a ride with Simon, coming round the banked corner now, down the alternative start-finish straight. And Simon just having a bit of a quiet race at the moment, but the crucial thing is he has not made any mistakes, and he's running around in P7, which is a very handy result for him in his championship bid. I think from what I can remember, Simon is at mid-table in the championship. He's around about 6th or 7th in the championship, considering that he's not always been the quickest driver, but he has shown up for every race and always scored those points. So it was always worth carrying on just for the consistency. And you can see that his tyres are pretty bad, I would have to say. This is getting towards definitely boxing within the next lap or two. But as I've mentioned in other races, Simon is one of the smoothest drivers in the field when it comes to steering and throttle application. So he does actually save quite a lot of fuel and save his tyres quite well compared to other drivers. So it does play off, especially around tracks like this where it's so strategy dependent and so it just pays off so much to keep tyres in check, just to keep yourself going for longer in the race. This could play off quite nicely into Simon's hands. So he could be staring at actually hanging on to this P7 despite other drivers around him, I think, already making that stop. I think Razor was obviously one of the first drivers to pit and is bearing down on the back of the fellow GTR as our race leader, Small Jack, into the pit lane. And I don't know how much fuel he's going to take on board. I don't think it'll be a full tank. It isn't. It's just around 70% fuel. So he comes back out into P2. Bradders now takes the inherited race lead with Doug Barrow very close behind in third. So Jack's still running in a net P1, but they will have a little bit of trouble from the car ahead and the car behind. This has obviously not worked to how they wanted, because they will be getting dirty air from that GTR of Bradders. And I don't think Doug Barrow is also one to make a pass up for an overtaking opportunity. We have got another spinner. I think that is, unfortunately, TDC still running around in 11th. Slight front end damage there, which all the damage in this race will repair itself. It's only on light damage, so no heavy damage setting is turned on. So no need to pit, but it is just a bit of a nuisance to carry on for around about 30 seconds whilst the car has to repair itself. And Jack has actually now managed to break away from Doug Barrow. So they've got that heat in the hard tyre, and I imagine an overtake is not that far away. However, Bradders on his very old medium tyres, you just see they're running wide again, struggling with that, and I don't think Bradders will be particularly interested in slowing down his race by fighting for the lead, which he's not even in this battle, unless if he has some incredible pace towards the end. And Bradders does pit. He does get out of the way of Small Jack, our race leader. But that is a solid first stint from Bradders, despite not doing any practice before the days leading up to the race. So he will now pit onto, I presume, a set of hard tyres. Superboy also in the pit lane in the other GTR. And Petrol still going around on the old hard tyres that he started the race on. So he is now filtered back into P4. You just see there the visible understeer of those older tyres. It's not helping the rotation of that NSX at all. But just despite the slight issue he had where he had the crash on the back straight, they're still running in a solid position. P4 is nothing to sniff at, and Petrol's obviously got one less stop to do. If this is going to be a one-stop strategy by running the hard so long at this point in the race, then they're going to save a lot of time. And it's definitely worth exploring, because from the looks of it, a lot of other people are opting for a two-stop just for pure drivability. I think if the track wasn't as difficult to drive, a lot more people would be opting for that one-stop strategy. You just see there Simon on that really old front left tyre, and Superboy using the camber around the outside. That's a great move on that slightly cold medium tyre that he's just fitted to the car. But he's managed to go around the outsides of the banking and moved his way back up into P7. I think he's obviously dropped a position because Razor pitted so early on. Razor's had a massive undercut compared to other drivers around him. And Doug Barrow just exited the pit lane as well. He has fitted a brand new set of hard tyres, but with only about 52% of fuel on that in the car. I didn't quite see the percentage that he put in. But the important note is that he is definitely not running these tyres to the end of the race. He has not got enough fuel to make it. So this is looking like a very short stint on the hards, and I think he will be pitting back onto mediums before the end of the race. But in all of that, because he's put less fuel on board, he has now managed to jump Bradders, as Bradders did put 100% of fuel in the car. So Doug is hoping now to use the lighter fuel and the track position that he's got. He's got clean air, no issues from following in the dirty air of Petrolhead, who is about 6 seconds up the road from him. So there's a lot of clean air here that he can push into and just prep the tyres how he wants to, run some clean laps and get these hard tyres out of the way. However, having said that, from what I mentioned earlier about the Lexus, I think the Lexus is actually alright on those hards, so he might find he will spend longer than 5 laps on those tyres, and I think quite sensibly he's put more fuel in than just the minimum 5 laps. He's put more fuel in case he does find a little bit more pace or circumstances around him change where he will need to go longer on that stint. So he might find that he actually quite enjoys the hard tyres. At the moment, I can't really see any issues, any losses of the back end. You'd obviously expect that on brand new tyres, that they would be quite grippy. So we will see how these two play out, because they are on slightly offset strategies. But Bradders now does have the comfort that he's not got that much fuel to take on board for the rest of the race. He is going to save a lot of time compared to Doug when these two stop once again. And I think we have just seen a car come into the pit lane. Yeah, it was Simon on that. I think that probably was a punctured front left, because he's spent another lap after we saw the overtake with Superboy. He spent another lap on those tyres, so I'm pretty sure that would have been a flat tyre that he had, because I don't think there was much more grip left. But he's gone nearly half of the way of the race on one set of tyres, so I think he's quite comfortably, well actually I was about to say he was quite comfortably going to be able to make it to the end of the race on a one stop, but he has only put about 30% fuel in. So he's only going to do around about 5 laps on these tyres before he comes off them again, which is a bit of an odd strategy choice, because if I was in his position, knowing that I could get that far on that set of tyres, on mediums no less, on hards 100% you could get to the end from the 26-minute mark. But he's made his bed now, and he has still managed to retain track position over Barr behind him, after the instance of Barr and TDC behind. And you can just see they're dipping another wheel onto the grass. There's quite a lot of dirt being picked up around the track, so TDC definitely not the only driver to be using the grass as a little bit of extra track. There's quite a few corners around here where there's tyre marks going through the field. You can just see there on the exit of turn 4 as well. So as we approach the halfway point in the race, I'll just give you a quick race rundown. We've got Jack in the lead on relatively new hard tyres, with a healthy margin over myself, Tintin Fish in P2. And then in third on their original compound of tyres from the start of the race, we got Petrol, who is pretty much nearing their stop. Only a tiny little bit of fuel left in that NSX. Doug Barrow, best of the rest at the moment, P4 on relatively new hard tyres as well. Slightly building a little bit of a gap over Bradders in P5. Hair Razor being one of the first drivers to pit, is running on slightly old mediums I don't think are going to be doing many more laps. He is in P6, closely followed by Superboy in P7, probably the closest battle on track. Actually, scratch that, because we've got Mike, who was the first one to pit in this race, on a very nearly punctured set of medium tyres. Then the closest battle on track, we've got Simon running in P9, very closely followed by Bar in P10, with TDC rounding out the grid in P11. And we're going to quickly cut back to Bar and Simon coming down towards the trail braking hairpin. Bar switching to the outside quite aggressive there, looking for a very late apex. And it does give him a little bit of better exit speed, but the straight just isn't long enough before you have to go through the uphill left-hander. But Bar, with the bit between his teeth, he's got the heat in that tyre at the moment. And like I mentioned earlier, overcast weather is making it quite difficult for those who are newly pitted to just bring those tyres up to temperature. We've got Mike, as I mentioned, getting off those really old tyres, coming in for his second stop of the race. Hopefully that is his last stop, because it is going to cost him a lot of time if he does have to do a 3-stop race. And Mike does re-emerge with a full tank of fuel on his hard tyre. So I believe that is Mike now running to the end of the race. We'll see how much time he can actually save by being the first one to initiate the second round of pit stops. And Simon putting up a very stout defence from Bar as they round the high-speed turn 4. Bar just struggling a little bit in the understeer and the wake of that GTR up front. But there's still just over halfway through the race, so there's no need for rash overtakes. There is plenty of time just to make a slick move up the inside or potentially on the straight. And Bar looping it round, as I said, that plenty of time to make that overtake. He has got a bit too agitated on the throttle, and hopefully Mike manages to negotiate. Yes, he does. He manages to sweep around the outside, and Bar once again demonstrating his car control and probably winning in terms of style points at this point in the race. But once again, just one of those little errors. I think he was tucked up very closely underneath the rear wing of Simon's GTR, and I think that has just cost him, because he couldn't see where the exit of the corner was, and he has just straight up understeered off the track. So that is a big shame, because that was looking like an overtake waiting to happen. And unfortunately that has been the rarity of this race. We haven't seen that many overtakes actually on track. It's all been done through strategy, really. But I have a feeling this is going to be a slow burner. I feel like it's going to kick off at the end of the race. It obviously was quite a frantic start, with a few people having incidents and quite a few mistakes as everyone just settled down for the race. And I think the final stint in this race, once everyone's done their stop, all of these strategies are going to now converge on each other as we're watching a trio of GTRs led by Bradders on those hard tyres. And Razor still going very strong on those old mediums, which is not something that you normally see. Razor down the inside, Bradders leaving the room on the outside, but I think they've just made a little bit of contact, wheel banging on the exit. Superboy trying to bump draft his way to help Razor, but Razor losing the back end on those old tyres, costing himself greatly. And I think Superboy feels he might have been at fault for that, and quite sportsmanlike of Superboy just to give up the position and let Razor have another go. But all of that has just given Bradders a massive break as he comes now to start lap 20 in this race. Superboy just giving a flash to the lights to Razor, potentially signalling that he wants to work together and try and bring themselves back up to Bradders, or maybe it was just a bit of an apology for the earlier incident. But Superboy, now that he's paid his dues, now going around the outside at turn 2. Can he sling it up the inside for turn 3? No, not quite. Not really a corner where you can shoot it up the inside and not understeer into the guy on the outside. It is a very awkward corner, as the majority are around here. But now with a great exit coming off of turn 4, he darts to the inside line, but again Razor typical Razor fashion, one of the latest drivers on the brakes. You're going to have to get up very early in the morning to try and outbrake Razor. Superboy, with better throttle application, chooses the outside line for the downhill left-hander. And he's still there on the outside lane, picking up a lot of extra grip on the outside and moves his way up into P5. So, you can just see there, my point stands of how difficult it is to make an overtake. That overtake took well over half a lap just to pull off. And when two drivers like Superboy and Hair Razor are quite even on ability, it does mean it is incredibly difficult to make that pass stick. And I have noticed in the background as well that Petrol has newly pitted onto a set of medium tyres. So I think they are now trying to go to the end. I would presume so, considering how much fuel they put in the car. So Petrol potentially staring at P3 once all these stops filter out. Doug Barrow and Hair Razor coming into the pit lane. And I think that pit stop is long overdue for Hair Razor. He was really struggling on those tyres. And this as well should be a run to the end. Same with Doug Barrow. And you can see there that Doug has had to put around about 80% of fuel in the car. So that has really cost him a lot of time in the pit lane. And this now will be interesting to see, because I don't think Bradders, depending on how his strategy is going to go, he's actually got quite a lot of fuel in the car. He might be trying to get a really long stint out of these hard tyres. So we will see how much longer he does spend on those hards, because he might have just fueled up there just when he pitted for the hard tyres, just so he didn't have to spend extra time pitting for the second stop. But it has given him a little bit more opportunity, a few more choices in what he can do for his strategy, because he could pit now, essentially, cover off Doug's undercut and spend the rest of the race on the mediums, only having to top up the fuel a tiny bit. Or he could go long and then do a very hard push at the end of the race. But we will keep an eye on how that plays out. And Superboy now moving his way up into P4 after Doug and Razor have made their stops. And seemingly not stopping there, because I think the gap between Bradders and Superboy is just closing in a little bit. And you would probably expect that with Superboy being on some very warm medium tyres. The sun has come out once again, so track temperature will be increasing. That is going to help those on the hards who are struggling to get it into the tyre temp window. And seemingly again, with Bradders at the head of the group, there is another train of cars converging behind him, probably within the next few laps, as Petrol, one of the favourites for the championship, just ploughing his way now through the middle sector of the lap. And you can just see those two GTRs up the road. I think Superboy already having a pretty decent lap so far, setting himself up for an overtake. He's already picked up the slipstream. He's going to wash a little bit wide coming through the banking, but he takes a very late apex. And this could be a battle on track between these two. I think it is looking like a strategy battle between most drivers, particularly these two GTRs. But they might even not make it to the pit lane before they have a little bit of an incident between the two of them. And you can just see though, Petrol on their brand new medium tyres, bringing themselves very much into contention, slamming through the gears for the braking of the chicane. And whilst we were watching that, Jack has just made their pit stop as well. So they've moved now up into, well, they've been demoted down to P2, but they are now on their sprint to the checkered flag. And from what I remember, Jack had to take more fuel in that stop than what he did on the first stop. So I believe Tintinfish, myself, will be saving a little bit time when I come into the pits, because there'll be less time spent with my car refueling. So despite the gap being pretty big, and we're going to put a pause on that as Petrol moving his way up past one GTR. Can he make it two GTRs on the same lap? He goes round the outside, moving his way up into the podium positions. And I think it is about time that Bradders possibly considers a switch onto the medium compound, as he's now lost another position to Superboy, who slings it down the inside. Superboy now trying to do the double, same way that Petrol has just done. Can he go around the outside? It will turn into the inside for the hairpin. A little bit of bumper contact, but nothing major. And again, a little bit of wheel banging as well. Petrol trying to keep him tight to the apex. That's going to compromise both of their exit speed. Does it give Bradders an opportunity? Now down to the final chicane. And Petrol's still there on the inside. Is he going to let this one go easily? Of course he isn't. He throws it down the inside. Manages to get enough of a gap, but that is going to leave him that little bit of a slide coming out the chicane. Does Superboy now have another look down the inside for the hairpin of turn one? He thinks about it, but not quite got enough grip to break that late. And Bradders seemingly sniffing the back of his fellow GTR, his fellow teammate. And, well, nothing short of drama there, as we've been building up to that moment for pretty much 40 minutes, and finally we are getting some typical GTRC battles where it just seems like it's going to chop and change every single corner. And all of that fighting, I've just realised, has brought Doug Barrow in the background, running around in P6 at the moment. It is bringing him back into contention after he had to spend a lot of time refueling in his second stop. So Doug on brand new mediums, already catching the back of Bradders by the looks of it. I think this is definitely an indication to Bradders that if he is on that two-stop strategy, he's going to have to get in the pits soon to make it wild, just make it worthwhile for him to actually use that second set of mediums, because I think he might have tried. This could be a one-stop strategy from Bradders, but I genuinely think that there isn't enough fuel. That GTR is too thirsty to really make that one-stop work. And there is obviously an explanation as to why the two-stop is a lot more viable at this track than what it was at Watkins Glen. And that's because this is a bit more of a club-style circuit, is definitely suited to club racing and slower cars, this track. The pit lane is quite short, so you don't actually lose that much time by pitting for an extra lap. For an extra set of tyres. And Bradders just moving about on the straight, trying to break the slipstream a little bit. He was very early to cover off the outside line for turn 2. And on the defensive again for turn 3. But Doug with the old switchback coming on the traction. And I think he just about leaves enough space, but he cuts in for the apex. So Doug up now into P5, setting his sights on the other GTR of Superboy up front. And yeah, Superboy not far away from his pit stop. I think he will be pitting at the end of this lap. So that will leave just Petrol and Doug with their battle to resume from the first stint in the race. And the weather seemingly going haywire this race, as I think it's now turning back towards overcast again. So that is going to decrease the tyre temperature, decrease track temperature as well. So the gods of Gran Turismo are not making it easy at the moment for our drivers. And I think, has there been a pit stop yet for myself? I think there might have been. I think there must have been, yes, because Jack has now inherited the lead once again. But the gap is smaller, which is down to obviously that extra fuel that I took on board for the first stint of the first pit stop, compared to Jack, who decided to take more fuel on during the second stop. As Superboy comes out of the pit lane with Hair Razor, who's just gone straight on at turn 1. He did look unusually slow, and Hair Razor with some massive issues there. He's seemingly stuck in gear. He's managed to find first, but he was in fourth for a long time there. And thinking back to the discussions after the race, I believe this is the point in the race where Razor's wheel has disconnected and it has stopped working. So he's switched over quite hastily to the controller, and I think we're now going to see quite a different approach to Razor's driving style here. But his good pace earlier on in this race has actually given him a bit of a buffer. He can now hang on potentially to this position. He's got a bit of a gap to Mike behind, but obviously Mike will be several seconds a lap faster, I imagine, whilst Razor just gets used to driving on the controller again. But that is a massive shame for Razor, who's having a really good race despite the liveliness of that GTR on its back end. And everyone else just a little bit spread out. I don't think there's any battles on the track at the moment. This is all building up for the end of the race. And I've just noticed that Tintinfish and Jack are swapping fastest laps at the moment. I believe on the last lap, Jack has just set their personal best, which is the now new fastest lap of the race. And the lap before that, I believe it was my fastest lap. So a lot of things are building up here for the end of the race. Both leading drivers pushing each other hard for this final 15 minutes and counting. And you can see there, I am now another further 3.5 tenths up on this lap. So I think that new fastest lap is going to be overturned once again. But I would not count out Jack for a response, as we are pretty much nearing the qualifying times for this race. I can't remember if I've explained qualifying rules before in the live streams, but it is a simple 1 out lap and 3 flying lap format. And we have got a spinner. I think that is TDC again, judging off where he is on track, and yes it is. Just waiting for the 2 leaders to filter through before he rejoins the track. But yeah, as I was mentioning, the qualifying rules state that you've got 3 flying laps, 3 consecutive flying laps, I should point out, to set your quali time. But it is done with the race fuel, so you have to qualify with a full tank of fuel. You don't have to qualify on the tyres that you start on, but I believe the pole time was a 40.2, and as you can see on the left hand side of the screen, I have now beaten that time by about 2 tenths, but I think that is pretty much all of the optimum grip used from those mediums. We just saw that I ran onto the grass coming out of turn 5. So already possibly overheating those tyres, not ideal for my race, but I don't think there's really any hope of me catching. I did say that this was building up for the end of the race, but unless if there is some outside intervention, Jack has driven pretty much a faultless race so far, and they're more than likely looking to take the win here at Alsace for round 3. And I think this will be one of the few times in GTRC history where a reserve driver is going to win the race, but I don't want to give him commentator's curse, so we'll swiftly move on to other topics, as petrol still circulating on those old medium tyres, but Doug hasn't actually made that much of an impression. Doug was quite close to petrol a few laps ago, the last time we checked in on these two. But Doug seemingly just hasn't been able to kind of hang on to the back of Petrol's pace, which will obviously be a great deal of comfort for Petrol, as Bradders bails into the pit lane a little bit too late, I think, but I don't think there's quite enough fuel in that GTR. I think if there was a little bit more fuel, Bradders would 100% go to the end of the race, but he's pitted for a brand new set of medium tyres, and he's still going to come out in P6, so he's only lost one position, and Superboy is not actually that far up the road. However, I think Superboy himself is only 2 laps post his second stop as well, so these two on relatively even tyres in the same car will be quite an interesting battle to watch between those two, as Razor still locking down that P7, which is a very commendable effort, you have to say, considering he's on the controller. I don't even remember the last time he will have used a controller on this game, but it is still a very good race at this stage just to hang on to these points. And we have got a battle once again between Bar and Simon, the battle for 9th place once again. And I don't know if Bar's been launching any new attacks at Simon over the past few laps, but again, pushing hard, the pair of them. Bar getting all out of shape, coming through turn 3 and running onto the grass there. Does he keep it out of the wall? Yes, just about. Keeps it in a straight line as well. But the grass on his tyres now will be hurting his performance quite badly through these next few corners. You just see that the understeer, that Lexus is not behaving to Bar's liking, and again he's off the track, picking up a load of grass. A very expensive lawnmower, you'd have to say, that Lexus. And I don't think he's the only one who's been on the grass, as we've seen from many of the drivers. I think every single car in this category is prone to a bit of understeer, which you would expect with them being slightly older cars. And as you can just see at the top of the screen, it did just flash up, there are blue flag warnings as well. So this could actually play into Bar's favour here, as Simon is maintaining a bit of a healthy gap between the pair of them. But obviously with Jack now bearing down on the pair of them, lapping faster behind, if Bar could tuck into the back of Jack's slipstream, he could pull himself along and pull himself onto the back of Simon, and that's what I would do in Bar's position, just to use the faster car and potentially just try and copy what they're doing. But I think we are still around about a lap away from these two being involved with the race leaders, so we will quickly check. Seeing as we've got just about 7 minutes left on the clock, I will give you a quick race rundown before the end of the race. We cut to Jack on the grass, and they're still in P1, as they have been for the majority of the race. Myself in second, with that gap shrinking ever so slightly, a few tenths here and there. I am closing in. Then we've got Petrol still on their one and only stop, still on their second stint in this race. And I think we've got a crash somewhere, and that is Razor on his controller off at the hairpin. And unfortunately he has now given that position to Mike in the NSX, and unfortunately I think that has sealed his fate, because he's now lost that track position. It is so important around here to have track position, because it just helps your defense of that position so much, as you would expect being in front. And now Razor is actually under threat from Simon behind as well. We've got Bar being signalled the blue flags, with Jack bearing down on them, and we've actually just cut to Jack, who's got front end damage. So I don't know when that's happened. I don't think it was when he went off at turn 4. I don't think it could have been, because that was obviously almost 2 minutes ago now, and the light damage does not last that long. But somewhere on the lap, Jack has got damage, and they've still got damage. It's only just gone away, so it might have been in the final chicane, which is obviously where we've seen other cars go off. I think TDC has just had another spin at turn 1. And in the background, I've just caught that. I have nearly clobbered the Armco barrier, sliding wide onto the grass. So, at this final point in the race, we've only got 5 minutes left. A lot of the drivers out there are struggling for pace. And I think we'll take this opportunity to ride on board with Jack, just to see how he's going to negotiate the traffic. His first target is Hair Razor, so unfortunately, Razor just losing out those positions. He's going to collect the back of the GTR, and Razor off in the background. You can just see in the mirror at the top of the screen, he's been fed into the barrier by the race leader. So I don't know if that was a little bit of lag, because Jack has absolutely no damage. I don't think there's any visible damage either to that car. So that might have been just a connection issue that's sent Razor into the wall, because the contact did look a little bit strange. And I will also quickly point out the blue flag rules in this series. This is very much like a typical endurance regulation, in the fact that the cars that are a lap down don't actually have to get out of the way for the leaders. They are allowed to carry on with their own race, and it is sort of for this sort of scenario where Bar and Simon are having their own battle, and the last thing that they want is to give up time just to let the leader through. So you can see that Jack is actually having to race these two in order to lap them, which does add a little bit of peril towards the end of the race. But Jack now down the inside, a pretty slick move. So that has now put everyone from 8th downwards a lap down. But I think because of that rule of the lapped cars don't have to get out of the way, I think that has brought myself a little bit closer. You can see now we're both occupying the track in the same camera shot now. So that gap has definitely diminished between the top two in the race. But obviously it is going to swing back round to punish me now, as I have now got to catch the lapped cars and make my overtakes on them. So this will be quite interesting to see, as Bar has another moment of just lighting up the rear tyres, and there is a little bit of contact there. I don't think there's going to be any damage. There's definitely not any damage to my car. And just quickly checking with Bar, well, there is a lot of damage to that right-hand side of the Lexus, and I think that's more down to the crash he had into the Armco. I don't think that was contact with myself. So Bar just lighting up the rear tyres, as he has done many times in this race. It's not been his race, unfortunately, despite demonstrating some really solid pace. But he has managed to make up that position now that Razor is still struggling on the controller. And we have just crossed the final 2 minutes of the race. So I think we're going to still have 2 laps left in the race. And there is slight fuel concern here for some of the drivers. I think Jack might be saving a little bit of fuel, though. It's already flashing red at this stage in the race, which is not ideal considering that we still do have another lap to go. And normally that does happen when it is urgent to pit. But I think that Jack has probably been saved here by the lapped cars, as I am just not making the positions up as quickly as I should be. And we'll see. I don't think Simon, just taking the middle of the road there, trying to stay ahead of myself. But I think there is a little bit of better traction for the Lexus coming out the final corner as the race leaders now do start the final lap of the race, and the Lexus swooping around the outside to put the lap on Simon. But I think it's a little bit too late now in the race. There's too much time to make up between the top two in the race. And Doug Barrow has been putting on a very big charge recently. He has now managed to claw his way back to the back of Petrol in that NSX, who is running on very old tyres at this stage in the race. He's been on those for about 25 minutes. I think we've got another spin for TDC looking at the track map. And Petrol just slightly covering off that inside line, not wanting Doug to get anywhere near a potential overtake, not wanting to give him even half a chance to get up the inside. But as I mentioned, if you look at the track map, the race has closed up massively despite it being a very slow burner. I did predict that it was going to close up quite significantly as we've got our first driver to cross the line. I think that was actually Bradders who had that spin at the kink, the uphill kink after the trail braking hairpin. But we have got our race leaders coming through the final chicane, and it is going to be a first win of the season for Smalljack as he crosses the line with a diminished gap between him and myself. So it's P2 for Tintin Fish, and P3 still disputed the final place on the rostrum. Doug Barrow just getting a little bit wide. I think that has just cost him that position. And I think Petrol now will be settling in for that final step on the podium. The understeer of that Lexus just proving too powerful, too significant for Doug Barrow. So it's Petrol P3 with Doug Barrow best of the rest in P4. Superboy will cross the line to finish P5 with a bit of a dramatic flare as he lights up the rear tyres. And just to round out the rest of the finishers, Bradders in P6, Mike in P7, Simon in P8, Bar in P9, Razor in P10, and TDC the final finisher of the race. And with that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next replay for the mini season.